Welcome back to another episode of the Return of the Roar Sacramento Kings podcast on Sactown Sports 1140. My name is Brenden Nunes. Got a tired, hardworking Frankie Cartoscelli here with us. Busy night. What's going on, Frank? How you doing, man?
Dad Watch 2025. We had our legitimate scare slash not scare, sorry, it's probably a bad word to use right now. False alarm slash rehearsal trip to the hospital, whatever you want to call it, this morning at 4:00 in the morning. And not ready yet. Who knows? Wife is sleeping right now. She's sleeping it off. And I took a little nap myself and then ready to talk some Kings. But it's gonna be an interesting week for us here. It's been an interesting week for the Kings as well. Like last night, we were kind of joking that would have been a very, very fun story if, because my wife was thinking maybe it was time last night. And of course, the game goes into double overtime, like the first double OT game in a while, I think since last year against Orlando. And we were kind of just saying how funny it'd be if, she really went into labor and, double overtime kind of kept me from getting home. Didn't happen though. All good. But Chris Watkins here as well. Christopher, your sister you just became an uncle recently, so he's been kind of helping me through everything. So thanks for that, man. But how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I think I'm doing better than you are. No offense. But yeah, it's definitely been a journey following your journey. And I hope that it comes to an end soon because, it would have been really interesting last night to see your decision making process of like, okay, like it's getting down towards the end of the fourth. Okay, cool. Like I think it's gonna end, and then overtime, and then like how many overtimes would have been too many overtimes? I'm glad that you got through the night. Yeah.
How many would have been too many? I don't know. She was so far apart. Like I had time, but like if it was a different situation, I think it's. They're saying 4 to 5 minutes apart for like a couple hours. She was like at 7 or 8 last night.
Okay.
And now I think she's falling back. So like I think last night would have been interesting if it was like 6 minutes. I'm like, babe, but like DeRozan's cooking
All
overtime
right, so
right
6
now.
minutes. So by the end of the game, if you feel another one, then
Keon Ellis is putting Tyler Hero like in a cell right now.
In
like,
a swaddle. He is swaddling Tyler Hero.
Swaddling. I can't just leave yet, but nope. We're good. We're waiting. We'll see if I make it to next week's pod. But man, it's been a crazy week for the Kings too, though. Like I mean, just kind of like last night was a culmination of it, and I think we talked a little bit about how anytime you go into a lengthy break, and the Kings have had a couple this year, they've played a lot of games this year. I'm not sure if they rank as far as games played among other teams, but like last night, I think they had played 3 or 4 more games than Miami. It feels like they're always in a spot where they've played more than their opponent, and a good spot to be in. You don't have De'Aaron Fox, you beat the Heat, and now you have 3 days to kind of relish in it and get some practice in. But I don't know, man. Just Brenden, I'm just wondering how are you feeling about everything, sir? I know you got your A's hat on. You had the A's in the house last night, so I guess everyone's kind of riding that high from last night.
Brent Rooker signing I guess you'd say team-friendly extension courtside at Golden One?
In overtime, in the first overtime, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, I'll stop rambling. He was buried into his phone for a little bit, and I was kind of like peeking over there. I'm like, why is he buried into his phone when like this game is tied in overtime? And I'm assuming his agent was probably like,
yeah,
is 60 or was it 50 or 60 over 5? 60 over 5 good for you? And he's probably like, sure, like that's great.
Just casually texting, yeah, I'll take 60 mil.
Yeah.
That has to
nice.
That has to be the conversation is. It has to be his 5 for 60 work. So. And he's probably like, I mean, yeah, that sounds great. Like the A's haven't given out, they wouldn't give out like an extra coupon to Cinemark, over the past couple of years. And now they're forking out $25 million to Severino and paying, guys for extent. They have to do this because of the agreement with MLB. I get it. They have to do it, but kind of a good thing for those guys to see last night. I think Sacramento sports is kind of going to be under a microscope with the A's here. And Lawrence Butler and Brent Rooker, I think JP Sears, JJ Bleday, manager Mark Kotze palling up with Vivek and Anjali Ranadive at center court. I think that was like the most ideal game you could hope that they see. And, maybe we'll see more baseball players at games in March and April.
So they really Brent specifically fell for the city of Sacramento and was like, I need to re-sign now. got to overtime. They
Yeah.
overcame a 15-point deficit, and he was just like, I need to be here. I need to
Yep.
be here. Started shooting texts right away. Just get it done. And he's sticking around in Sacramento. Moat called them the Sacramento A's yesterday, and I was kind of quietly laughing to myself because
That's
I
a
don't know if
double
they're
no.
using that terminology. Before we get to the Kings' 5-game win streak, because obviously that's important here, Chris, you did Spanish radio last night, and you got a double overtime game where DeMar DeRozan scored the final 9 points or 8 points in overtime.
Yeah.
What were those
That's true.
calls
It was
like?
8, yeah.
What were those calls like?
Pretty incredible.
Nice.
It was I wish I didn't butcher that. It was actually really interesting. It was a different experience for sure, obviously. I don't really know what to, like I could pick up a couple words, and that was interesting to kind of test my Spanish knowledge. Haven't really formally studied Spanish since high school. My mom's fluent, but I can't speak a lick, so it was just interesting to kind of de double. I was like, hey, I know what that is.
I know some of these words.
Yeah, so it was kind of fun. I don't know, it was definitely interesting. All I had to do was have the headset on and listen to the Spanish broadcaster. I can't remember what his first name Jose, really nice guy. Or at least he was yesterday. It was pretty interesting. Just had to tell him Sabonis double. 5 steals for Bam Adebayo. Just kind of making sure that he knew what numbers were popping up, and seemed like I did a pretty decent job. He didn't yell at me or anything like that, and I know sometimes broadcast people can be very let's say particular about how they like things. So felt pretty fun, but it was go ahead.
No, didn't we hear that the guy is kind of intense that you were working with? Like, people said he's kind of intense.
Yeah, I had heard. I had heard from the sound engineer, who's a great guy too. He had said that this guy was pretty notorious for being one of the more we'll say intense guys around the league. Demanding for sure. And I just tried to charm him. I walked up and I said, hey man, how can I make your day easier? How can I make it better? And I was told literally yesterday or 2 days ago that I was doing this. I walked up, I just thought I had to read box scores and whatever. Yeah. Tell him stats. He was like, you don't have a paper, you don't have any of the stats, and they give us those little pregame packages and stuff like notes, that have all the notes exactly. And I did not bring any of that, and we got off to a rough start, but we eventually got there, and at least that first quarter there weren't many stats to give him, so I kind of had some time to get accustomed to what I was doing first. Pretty fun though.
Yeah, not bad. Well, muy bueno for Christopher Sacramento Kings.
That's right.
5-game win streak out here.
Wow.
Doing all right. Nunes, Portuguese, not Spanish, but same language. Yep. Or, well, not really. Actually, that's not true at all.
Similar, from what I understand.
We'll walk that back, but similar. We'll walk that back.
Yeah.
But yeah, 5 in a row, and 5-1 under Doug Christie for the Sacramento Kings. The last 2 without De'Aaron Fox. I think that we had talked after they beat the Philadelphia 76ers and were 2-1 under Doug Christie. Obviously 3 in a row since then. Go down the line a little bit to start with the caveats, even though I'm sure people don't love that. A lot of injured teams the Kings are going against. It starts against Dallas with no Luka Doncic, no Kyrie Irving, no Najee Marshall, and Derek Lively in that game, and there may be 1 or 2 others. Philadelphia 76ers, no Joel Embiid, no Jared McCain. They do have Paul George out there. Paul George had a heck of a first half and then absolutely slowed down towards the end of the game. Memphis Grizzlies without John Morant, no Santi Aldama. I'm sure that there's other guys I'm forgetting there as well. Golden State, they play actually pretty, I was going to say pretty healthy, but no Kuminga, no Gary Payton, and no Pajemski in that game. They were
on a back-to-back too. They had, didn't you say they had played, or someone said they had played at 5:30 the day before, and they played at 7 the day before and played at 5:30 the next day. So 2 games, I guess, in 22 hours or something like that.
Yeah, no Steph in the first one, but Steph in the second one. Kuminga just got injured the game before that first night of the back-to-back that you're talking about there. And then the Kings play the Miami Heat, when Jimmy Butler's on his second of a 7-game suspension right after this whole drama surrounding him and a public, not exactly a trade request, but may as well have been a trade request, and the back and forth that's going on, Pat Riley comments, whatever. This is the first of a 6-game road trip for the Heat. And this is right after they just got smacked by the Utah Jazz, by the way. The Utah Jazz that the Kings have beat 3 times, by the way. And that 6-game or the 7-game suspension lines up with that game against the Jazz, and then their 6-game road trip that Miami is on right now. So the beginning of the Jimmy Butler suspension road trip for the Miami Heat. And Miami had a 15-point lead with about 6.5, 7 minutes left in that game. And the Kings go on a really good run to close that one out. Overtime. A lot of missed free throws for both sides, keeps it into a double overtime. DeMar DeRozan scores 8 straight points, almost 9. I think they determined that a foot was on the line in classic DeMar DeRozan fashion for one of his threes turned into a 2. But they're executing here. There's a 15-0 run, I believe it is, to close that Philadelphia game. Their first front-to-back, never trailing in the game win against the Golden State Warriors. They execute in the clutch against Memphis. They execute in the clutch of regulation and 2 different overtimes against the Miami Heat and are getting it done. And again, these 2 games without De'Aaron Fox, Keon Ellis playing an extremely big role. Obviously, the minutes difference between, what he's playing under Christie and Mike Brown are going to vary a lot because this was a double overtime game. But this is the 3 of the 6 games since Christie has been head coach that Keon Ellis is playing 30-plus minutes. That feels like one of the biggest adjustments. I guess we'll start with you, Chris. Really, take it wherever you want, but 5 wins in a row for this Kings team. How much are you, getting more faith in this group during this streak, or what differences are you noticing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely starting to get more faith for sure. I feel like when we recorded last time, I wouldn't say we were negative, but we were definitely in a wait and see kind of mode where we were optimistic that Doug and us kind of having a previous relationship with Doug a little bit, knowing the energy that he brings. I think we thought it would be a good change, and if anybody could turn it around, it would be Doug. But I think rightfully so, we had questions. I wouldn't say about the X's and O's, but more so about the institutional knowledge of what it takes to be a head coach. Doug's obviously been in that position for a couple years now, but it's just different. And he's talked about it in his pregame pressers a lot. The game being fast and recently the game being slowed down, just like it is, or just like we talk about with players. It is with coaches as well. The decisions you have to make, substitutions, timeouts. Think about all the things that go into just the actual in-game coaching that can just fly by if you aren't really accustomed to that kind of pace. And again, it's just different when you're the one actually making the decision. So that's really, if you listened to our last pod and felt like maybe we weren't all gung-ho, I think that's really what it stemmed from. But everything we've seen so far, I think, shows that we are. I'll more so say myself, like I might have underestimated just how strong Doug's charisma is. Really, I kind of last time was talking about, hey, this happens in all sports. Yeah, you get a new coach and there's always new energy, and that still might be the case, but with Doug, for whatever reason, and we've heard the quotes from the players, I think that's really what's driven it home during this win streak is. They just sound so much like they believe in Doug and the message that Doug is sending them. It makes me believe that, I mean, at the very least, I won't say 5 years, 3 years down the line, but as long as the Kings have this core, I think Malik Monk, Domantas Sabonis, and I guess we can now throw Keon Ellis in as a Doug guy. I feel like the connection that they have with Doug Christie, they just inherently trust him, and I don't think that's going to dissipate over a couple of years. I think when Doug kind of, for lack of a better term, gets his claws in you, I really think it's hard to go against him, and I think that might just be the subtle difference that Mike Brown has with Doug Christie is, Mike, we know he had a relationship with these guys at first, but I think after a couple years of being the hard ass and being the one that's on you every single day, the thing that they seem to really like about Doug is he's just always positive and always reinforcing that you're the best. And I'll just leave it at this. I mean, his pregame comment from yesterday, I think is going to stick with me for a really long time. Just the humbleness to say, honestly, coaching isn't about me. This is not about me. This is about those guys. Like, too much is made of the decisions that I make, and hey, I can call as many pick and rolls as I want. It's really about those guys going out there and executing. And I think that's like a level of humbleness that you frankly just don't hear out of anybody. And so I think that might actually be something that makes Doug potentially like a one of a kind coach.
Yeah, and kind of to bounce off that, like you said, I mean, Mike had a particular style, and we mentioned last week how we heard the excessive practices and kind of honing in on certain guys and kind of demanding a lot of them. There are qualities that are positive in that. Uh, wanting more from a player is not a bad thing, and I think that even the way Mike went about it with the media, which is demanding more from his players through talking to us or talking through post game pressers, what have you. Some looked at that negatively. I don't think the players necessarily did, but I think it's a matter of kind of coaching style and kind of what Malik said the other night. I think in San Francisco that Mike was Doug was a player, and Doug's able to level with guys and kind of see things through their lens. And I do think you see some situations where that works out. And Sacramento now is a place where, again, like we pointed out, and not to rain on the parade, saying like the Kings have been playing all these teams who are missing this guy and that guy, and because early in the year, people weren't feeling sorry for the Kings, and they're missing Malik and missing Domas for a bit, missing Trey Lyles, and down the line, no one's feeling sorry for you, and the Kings have no control who's in front of them. They have to win games by any means necessary. And the way they're doing it right now is, in my opinion, far different than what we've seen so far this year, and maybe even last year. I mean, even last year was not really – they had a good start last year, but things kind of fizzled out and got flat, and it's not the same energy you had that Beam team season. Dare I say it? I mean, I feel like the last 5 games have really kind of replicated that feeling of that Beam team inaugural season 22-23. I mean, just kind of the camaraderie and the body language. I'm again kind of pointing back to last week as well. I told you that Sam Amick has his binoculars, and I watch a lot of body language now because it kind of tells you things that you can't always see. I mean, TV doesn't show every interaction that close, so I try to kind of bounce around and look around, and the guys are in a much different mindsets or spirits, whatever you want to call it. They're not just saying to the media, they're acting different on the court. I mean, we've seen pictures, plastered all over social media today of Domas, Doug Christie, and Keon Ellis hugging on the floor last night. I mean, it's a relationship that they've had for a couple of years now, obviously, Doug, with these players, but giving these guys a chance to kind of step back and breathe and get back to playing basketball, just kind of focusing on basketball and having some downtime, which I think has been beneficial for them. There's been a couple of days where normally they would have practice and they haven't, and Mike 100% would have had practices, and it's good to prepare. And is there such thing as over preparing? Maybe some would disagree, I guess, but for this group, it's clear that they needed some kind of change, and that doesn't mean what happened with Mike is fine. And I had like an exchange with someone on Twitter today who I tweeted saying that all the national media and other coaches were kind of calling the Kings out for how they handled the Mike Brown firing. And some guy quoted it and said, like, 2 steps back, huh, Frank? I stand by that. I didn't really mean it from the standpoint of the on-court product. The way that they handled the firing was still a problem, and the fact they haven't had a press conference is still an issue as well. But from the Kings' perspective, this is really the best case scenario for them because they're winning basketball games. Doug has been received probably universally with, positivity. And, they're doing in the last couple of games without De'Aaron Fox, who usually if Fox is out of action, the Kings it's almost like a scheduled loss. So beating the Warriors by 30 in San Francisco, the largest margin of victory that the Kings have ever had in the Bay Area, and then beating a Heat team who plays with physicality and had a large lead late, getting contributions from different players. I mean, the guys are buying in, and it kind of makes you believe that maybe there was more than we thought about, guys feeling comfortable under Mike. And I think that right now Doug's kind of just the right guy for the job, which is, I think, kind of not crazy, but I don't think a lot of us expected it to go this way.
Yeah, I'm torn on all the Mike stuff. I think there's a lot of laziness from different, just emotional fans, understandably, but I just don't like when the first reaction of now that they're doing good under Doug is everybody taking shots at Mike. Like I think that two things can be true. That Mike didn't do anything that I think necessarily meant he was deserved to be fired. But I also think that the organization it's understandable how they may have gotten to that point given the underperformances that had happened this year. I don't agree with the decision. But I think the other side that I'm saying also can be true is that Doug has done a really good job taking over this, and there clearly has been an energy like shift, I guess you would say, with this team. We played the Kevin Herter audio last episode where he talked about energy shifting when they moved from Lloyd Pierce to Nate McMillan. The energy is shifting. I'm going to keep using that wording until we see any differently.
Bleed
And
green,
so maybe a little bit. And I think that you notice it for sure. Mike is more of a, like, how do you say this? It's more Popovich. It's more military. It's more probably focusing on what needs to be cleaned up. I don't want to say negatives, but honestly, if it is, that's what's focused on, it could get taken as negatives a lot. But because he's trying to take them to another level. And I think that tone can get a little tiring at times. I think the practicing is definitely the biggest difference, the amount of how much they're practicing. And maybe that contributes to how much energy the group has. Don't really know. But there is like a togetherness, and Doug was put in a tough spot to try to keep this group together and maintain the belief. And he's done a great job of doing that. So I think it's okay to not say like, oh, so everything was going bad because it's Mike Brown's fault. Like there is also the aspect of, guess what? They kind of got fully healthy all of a sudden. And in the Warriors Memphis game, they shot above 40% from three. And yes, De'Aaron Fox is out right now. And that's, the Keon minutes are what I was getting to as well. That being a big difference, like I mentioned earlier. And you could say, well, if De'Aaron wasn't playing, then Mike would have played Keon. And we actually have a very recent example as I'm trying to go back and find this Denver game where Doug McDermott gets the start while De'Aaron Fox is not playing. No, I'm sorry. This is the game where Keegan didn't play, actually. But even then, somebody's out. Keon plays actually 32 minutes up in this one against Denver. So I think that there are some differences, but just saying, I don't think we need to go at Mike Brown just because Doug Christie is doing a good job in this situation as well. But we can make that the focus for sure. I don't think there's been fundamental differences when it comes to how they're playing stylistically. They're taking more threes by a bit. Doug has said that he wants a 40 threes per game marker. They didn't really reach that against Miami, but we've heard Mike Brown say that before. It's just that this year, I think he lowered his number a little bit to more like 35. So a little more threes. I think they're getting their pace back a little bit more. I think part of the energy being back and also Devin Carter being out there is their offensive rebounds are up about 3.5 a game since Doug Christie has taken over. Their assists are up about 5 a game. Hitting shots obviously helps, and they're getting more steals per game as well. But stylistically, it doesn't feel like there's huge differences going on with this Kings team out here under Doug.
Well, Chris, kind of to play off that, like you mentioned, like you're getting healthy at the right time, but also you're having players step up and play just better, I guess. I mean, Trey Lyles was kind of a nothing burger for most of the year, and Trey Lyles has been, I think he ended last night shooting 50% from three over his past couple of games, and even Kevin Herter for a stretch was playing pretty well off the bench. Like they're getting actual depth. They're seeing actual players step up and contribute. And even having another player like Devin, another NBA ready body, a guy who is already proving he can be just a menace on the glass. I mean, he's stealing rebounds from his own teammates, which is hilarious to watch, but the athleticism is there and it's great to see. But I mean, that's another part of it. It's like Mike, like you said, the fundamental differences, maybe they aren't there, but Mike didn't really have the luxury of dealing with or having a fully healthy roster. And the Kings, crazy enough, I think it's game 37 or 38 on Friday, maybe 36. I can't really remember. But assuming De'Aaron Fox is ready to play, that would be their first game all year with a fully healthy roster. Like they haven't had a game all year where everyone is ready to go, which raises another question, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But Keon's been so impactful, and that's been the biggest kind of, black eye to the whole Mike Brown situation is Keon Ellis and the amount of minutes he played. And I'm seeing people all over social media go at this is why cost Mike his job, and how could you let Keon get DNP CDs or play 12 minutes? And I think Mike was going about the Keon situation the way that he thought was best, that he believed in Keon, and he talked about Keon openly, to the media. He told us at practice that he thought Keon had abilities that you can't teach and that he'd never seen before in the NBA, but that he was still kind of a little green and having to kind of learn the ropes from an offensive standpoint and from, a schematic standpoint. And I think now we're kind of seeing Keon take that leap, and maybe that's a part of the progression. Maybe Mike has helped him get to this point. I would imagine that Keon would admit he has, but at the same time, Doug was Keon at one point. Doug was a 3-and-D player. And I think that Doug sees that in him and sees the fact that the Kings, a team that lacked 3-point shooting for most of the year and has lacked perimeter defense for the last 3+ years, maybe a decade, honestly, at this point. That's the kind of player the Kings have needed for a long time. They've needed that kind of, I'm not comparing him to Bruce Bowen, or Tony Allen, but they need a guy who can be just a complete terror on defense, who can get up in someone's face. Like, there's a clip from last night's game of him just, putting Tyler Hero in hell, just really putting pressure on him and stripping him and getting a fast break opportunity and drawing a foul. I mean, there's probably 2 players in the Kings that are capable of doing that, and it's Keon Ellis and De'Aaron Fox. And De'Aaron Fox is arguably an all-NBA talent. So I do think that was one of the bigger question marks for Mike's tenure, but that kind of plays back into the hand of Doug as a player's coach. And he sees things that maybe some coaches that are old school or come from a different way of thinking see it. And like you mentioned, Mike does come from the school of Greg Popovich. He's been with Steve Kerr, who's been criticized for his rotations always, even in the Olympics, where your boy Jason Tatum was getting DNPs or barely playing.
Especially favoring older guys and having a short leash with younger players. Like,
Definitely. And so that's kind of the way I look at it. I look at it as far as they're getting healthy at the right time. Guys that were previously struggling, even Keegan has been breaking out of a slump. He's playing better. Last night, he looked good from 3. The last couple of games, actually, he's returned. He's looked good from 3, double-double last night. He had a great block in overtime. They're getting healthy at the right time. They're having guys step up at the right time. And players like Keon, who originally were kind of in the background, are coming to the forefront. And now the question is, what does it look like as a I'm not calling it a polished, finished product because we don't know what's going to happen at the deadline. But what does this team look like from a rotation standpoint with Keegan in the lineup, with De'Aaron healthy, with Devin now in the fold, with Keon thriving in a starting role, with Malik Monk thriving in a starting role? I mean, there's a lot of questions they have to figure out because they're at a point now where, they have a lot of players that are contributing and playing well, but maybe not enough minutes.
Yeah, I definitely feel the difference of Mike and Doug. To me, really does it just highlights kind of what I mentioned last week. It's just the I kind of feel like some of this has to do with players these days and just how they like to be coached. Brenden, yeah, you kind of said militant. Like, I do think that, and Greg Popovich spent some time, like Coach K did, with the Naval, or I think it was either with the Navy or with the Army Academy.
Was it West Point? Did they both go to West Point?
I think it was West Point. Yeah. I think that was Army. So yeah, they have that institutional background, and I definitely think that it could just really highlight the difference of how players want to be coached today. It's that, it's the I don't know, it sounds like a pop culture talking point, but the kids these days don't like to really be yelled at and screamed at, and they the participation trophy, all that stuff. Like, I do think that some of that is kind of what happened with the Kings, is that they didn't like the fact that Mike was holding them hyper accountable. And I think one of you, I think it was Frankie, said, there's definitely, I think, some merit to that. Like, there's some people who are driven that way, and there's definitely years of results that say, no, like, you can't always just guide somebody along. You do have to push them and push their buttons. But I think Doug is just, Brenden, you said it last episode, you're going to hear the word love a lot, and you have heard the word love a lot. And I think that's really just, to me, the biggest difference that I've noticed between the two, is that Mike really led with an iron fist, and Doug is leading with hugs. There has been tons of hugs going around, and I just, it's crazy. It's really not analytical at all. We don't need us three to tell you it. Like, it's just the difference of being nice to somebody versus kind of being led and being scared of who you're. Or I don't know if scared's the right word, but being not look. I guess not. I guess it created an environment to which you could think that maybe they weren't looking forward to showing up to work every day because they were like, okay, what's it going to be today? I think we've all had teachers, we've all had coaches where, they just really like to harp on really small stuff, and nothing you do is ever good enough. And I just think that, at some point they got tired of it, and Doug could not be more opposite. And it's just crazy that it's led to such a shift on the floor as well. Like, I kind of can't believe how different I think the vibes have made the on-floor product look different.
And the one thing I want to add about Doug is that, kind of like a reminder last night, and there's a funny clip of Vlade right now circulating that I guess late in the game he got just enraged at a missed call, and Vlade, this giant man, is standing up in at the bottom of the camera feed, just waving his arms. It's Vlade Divac, and Doug has that reminder right there. I mean, Doug was a beloved figure, and it is one still to this day, granted, but those images that are seared into our brains, Chris, growing up, like watching these teams, like, Doug is a Kings legend. I mean, whether you agree with that or not, it's true. I mean, his picture and that number 13, and the sweatbands on to his elbows, and the Rick Fox punch. Like, there are Doug Christie memories in every Kings fan's mind, and that's why I think this fire, or just this personality, it's just Doug. It's just who he is. And I think this job for him, it's personal, and it means a lot. It means more than some other coaches, other jobs around the NBA, guys coming into a job. This opportunity is part of his legacy ultimately. And you've seen players like Vlade who, sadly, the legacy has been tarnished. And like, the Kings announced a Vlade Divac bobblehead at like the power markets, whatever. And I said, like, I mean, man, if that was Weber or Bibby, like, that thing's probably going to be selling like hotcakes. And maybe some people do want the Vlade, but it's different now. There's the Luka thing. Forever there's going to be the Luka thing. I mean, Luka's becoming one of the top. He might be a top 10 player of all time when he's done. Maybe top 5. Who knows, man? His numbers are crazy. And I think Doug's at the point right now where he doesn't want this to be a gimmick. He doesn't want it to be a thing where they let, this guy who played for the team a couple years ago be a coach. They were good for a little bit, and then they kind of fizzled out. He has great guys in his corner. He has the luxury of having guys like Jay Triano on the staff and Luke Laux, and down the line. Like, he has guys that have experience, like DeMar DeRozan on the roster. He has veterans around. I think that's why a big reason why, which we'll talk about the roster changes in a bit, but why Jay Crowder and Doug McDermott are sticking around. Guys that have been on multiple teams over the past decade plus that can kind of provide that perspective of, hey, we've been in these situations or been on winning teams or in these environments, Crowder especially, and this is what we can bring to the table. Doug's done that too. And Doug has been a player in every situation you can imagine. He was a young player on the Lakers. He was a kind of a middle-aged vet on a rebuilding Raptors team. He was a veteran on a Kings team that was the best in the league. He was an aging veteran on the Mavericks and the Clippers. Like, he's been a part of every situation you could think of. Played for the Knicks when he was a young player. So having that perspective is valuable. But watching the guy sniff smelling salts on the bench before a game, and his reaction to Domas's 3 last night, just like the memes are, and Mike Brown was very memeable, don't get me wrong, but Doug's showing he's just as or better, and it's because the guy cares, man. And I know that caring doesn't always result in wins, but I look at the fact that this 5-game winning streak has happened the way that it has, and the guys playing with the motivation that they have, and going to the roof and seeing the beam and, all these things. To me, that's telling. It's just telling that the chemistry has shifted, or the energy has shifted, to quote Brendan's favorite player, Jaylen Brown, highest paid player in the NBA, I believe, still.
Finals MVP,
Jaylen Brown.
Interesting.
But the energy has shifted. And I just kind of wanted to make a point that, nobody wants us to work out more than the Kings. And obviously Doug this is his shot. This is what he wanted to do. We've heard for years that he's wanted this opportunity. And I think you tweeted earlier, Brenden, that, and I agree. I think it'd be hard for him to kind of mess it up where he's not the head coach going forward. It seems like that's just what the organization wants, or what Vivek wants at least. And if it works out, that's great. But the guy cares, man. And it looks like the players care too. And that's the most important thing is, of course, Doug cares, but the players seem to be buying in and they seem like they care about it as well.
Yeah, it sounds all kind of dumb, cliche, like cheesy, which, by the way, shout out somebody in the last comments that was calling me cheesy. I thought that was great. That threw me off for a sec.
Cheesy.
Hold on real quick. I'll let you think. Where do you guys think the Drive Guys list had Doug Christie ranked? Of the top 40 Kings of all time, Doug Christie.
I should remember this because I made it. I don't remember.
I just had to look it up.
Is it 13?
12.
What if I told you Doug Christie fell to number 9? I shouldn't say fell, was at number 9 on the all-time Kings list, right behind Domantas Sabonis, sandwiched in between Sabonis and Reggie Theus.
Impact.
Sure.
I mean, he was all
Domas climbed the
what
ladder.
was he? 4-time all defensive. I think it was 3 times second team and 1 time first team. I think the guy was locked down.
He was, and I think the love of Sacramento that you guys talked about that Doug has, I do think that spreading that message and getting that across to the team is a thing. Like, again, as cheesy as that may sound, the going up to the beam, if there's anybody that understands how much the Kings mean to Sacramento, it's Doug Christie. And I think that the guys that have been on this team have seen the fan base show how much this team means to the city. And I think that you can rally around that a little bit. That the energy these last few games have been great at Golden One Center, specifically that Miami game, and you can go back to that first playoff game. Obviously, that game 1, Kevin Huerter and De'Aaron Fox and all these other guys will still tell you that was one of the coolest moments of their career, where it's a packed stadium, a packed Golden One, when they run out for warmups of game 1. Like, I think that the city has made that an easy message to believe from Doug. And there's something to that. And the whole loving everybody compared to being a little bit more of like I guess disciplinarian's the wrong word, but Mike would always use the term like holding guys accountable. And I think that's really what his goal is, but sometimes can get a little tiring. And I think that, again, Keon Ellis is probably the biggest example minute-wise that you've seen. And I think the question was always, well, where Keon's minutes going to come from? Right. Who is he playing over? And now you're even seeing Devin Carter being back in the rotation. And yes, no De'Aaron Fox these last 2 games, but it's really come at Kevin Huerter's detriment, where just going down the games since Doug Christie has been head coach, 24 minutes against the Lakers, but then you have 19 against Dallas, 18 against Philly, 14 against Memphis, just under 20 minutes against Golden State, and 15 minutes in a double overtime game against Miami. Just to be transparent, I wasn't sure that Mike was even allowed to, or that either coach, I'm assuming this would still be the same under Doug, would be allowed to play Keon significantly more minutes than Kevin. Like, there's always a lot that goes on to all this stuff, whether that's because of trade value conversations or whatever the fact may be. Sometimes there are decisions that are above your head. And I honestly thought that was probably what was going on. Maybe I was justifying it to myself, though, and coping a little bit, because I think the obvious answer was to play Keon more than Kevin. Not that Kevin doesn't have his benefits offensively. I think he fits in well with the group. Good size at 6'7". Actually, he's been rebounding, doing the little things well, moving the ball throughout these last handful of games. But it's come at the detriment of Kevin. And I think that that's the obvious way to go about that. And it's obviously worked out for the Kings. But Keon talked about his big game yesterday after the fact in the locker room. He had 17 points. He had 14 or 15 deflections in this game, 3 of 7 from 3. Great game all around from Keon. Here's him talking in the locker room after the game too.
Been getting a lot of run under Doug. Just, how much has it felt different to you since the change and you getting a lot of run out there?
It's been real different. I know there's times where I know for sure tonight. I think Doug probably looked at me and thought I was tired, which I kind of was, but like I knew I needed to stay out there, so I told him don't worry about it. I'll be all right. Like, I'll just try to get my energy through like the dead balls, free throws, or whatever. But it's definitely been different in that aspect. He's given me a little bit of more rope, and I think also like late, I think when I had that turnover, like those are crucial. But I mean, he's just like, don't worry about it. You'll get it back. Just go get it on the other end. So things like that just kind of eases your mind a little bit. So I think those are more so the biggest differences. And he's out there telling me, if I pass up a shot or whatever, he's like, can you shoot it? Like, tell Domas to go get the rebound or something. So those are some of the differences with him out there.
It feels like one of those, like you're mentioning, that like longer leash you might have under Doug. How much do you feel like, you can still, because like Mike's thing seemed like holding accountable and wanting to, learning lessons, but how much do you feel like you can still have those learning moments and where to pick up and clean up while playing through it?
Oh, for sure. I think, we're all pros, so I think we know, like, when you mess up, what you did wrong and what you actually should have did. So whenever I do something wrong, I immediately know, like, what could have been done or should have been done. So I'm learning, like, right there in the moment. But, I mean, I know, like, there's times where you could make a mistake and it's, it's crucial. So you kind of want to put more experienced guys in for you. But, I mean, kind of like I said, just the faith that he has in me to play through it and, correct myself is huge.
Do you feel like it's been easier to buy into him because he has that player perspective?
I think it's just been easier just because, there's not a lot of rules, honestly. The only real staple is just going out there and playing hard, playing for each other. The offense, the defense is, just playing aggressive and playing our game. Like, what he's preached is a lot of communication on the defensive end. Like, if we're blitzing someone, just talk about whatever we're doing. We run a bunch of different things, but it doesn't matter. So as long as we're communicating and getting through it, that's all that matters. And then on the offensive end, it's like you have the best players in the game, so you're just giving them the ball. I think that was the first message he told us. It's just going to get real simple. Late game or whatever throughout the stretch. Fox, you get it. We're running this play. Debo, you got whoever has it. You guys are pros. You guys are the players out there. We're going to give you the ball, and you're going to go out there and make it happen. So I think he just puts it all on us, and then I think he just wants us to go out there and play hard and play for each other.
Yeah, less rules. I think having a longer leash, there's definitely some noticeable differences. And I think just to give more examples of Doug's messaging, like we go into the locker room and on their whiteboard, I forget the first wording. You might remember, Frank, after they came back from the Lakers and they played against Dallas, and it was either the Dallas or Philly game. It said no effing something on the whiteboard, like some messaging up there to the team.
I can't remember if it was quit or something. I
Yes,
can't remember.
I think it was quit.
I think it was quit. Yeah,
I think it was quit. And then against the Warriors on the road, Doug made it pretty clear that, they wanted a little bit more this game, that this was going to be a physical game. We're denying Steph Curry the whole time. Keon Devin share that responsibility. And he says they did well, right? And then they come back and play this game against the Miami Heat, go into the locker room, and you see up there just says more in huge letters, right? And that's just Doug saying, I want more from these guys. Not great handwriting, whoever's writing up there, for what it's worth, but I'm a little bit of a weirdo for that stuff.
You just have good handwriting.
I do enjoy my handwriting. I may
you don't
have
know what it's like.
Yeah.
The
other hilarious part, and that I think speaks to just the difference in, I think, how things are communicated. It's not what's being communicated, it's how it's being communicated, I think, is the difference between Mike and Doug. And Mike, we mentioned the more like military feel to him. Doug is out here quoting Bob Marley and Deepak Chopra, and you're muted, Chris, but it is great. It's great stuff from Doug. And next to more on their whiteboard in the locker room, there's a like Twitter blue check mark. And I asked him there, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, what's the verified thing? It's like, we're a verified team. I was like, what? I don't know about all this. Again, some of it's cheesy, but I think it speaks to the difference in these two guys, right? Like that's very Doug, and I don't know that it's fully Doug's decision necessarily, all of these different things, but it's definitely just a change in tone. And I think it's rubbing off on some of the guys.
Yeah, I did not know that. That's definitely something. Yeah, I mean, I would also expect, on top of you saying the other day, love, you're going to hear a lot of Bob Marley quotes. Like, a lot of Bob Marley quotes. Doug loves him some Bob Marley. The one thing that I think really highlights what we were talking about beforehand that Keon just mentioned, it just, I don't know, it sounded like the volume was on 10 when he said, we're pros. Like, we know. When we mess up, like, we know. Like we are very aware of what we're doing. We don't really need to be told that. And again, I just really think that highlights maybe where everything went wrong. And yeah, again, I think you have to kind of make up for yourself if you feel like that's justified for Mike's firing. But to me, I do kind of think that it ultimately comes down to these guys didn't like to be told all of the time that they were making mistakes, and we talked about it when discussing the press conferences leading up to Mike's firing. He had just singled out Domantas Sabonis. He had just singled out De'Aaron Fox. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, to me, I just can't help but really, when you hear the quotes that have been coming out from Keon, specifically, I mean, it's not to point fingers, but it's specifically really been Keon, Malik, and Domas that have had really pointed comments. And I think DeMar, even if you read some of the subtext, those guys have had it really, really strong quotes that are really highlighting to me where this all kind of seemingly went wrong.
Quick note before we move on to the next thing. I'm not sure what we're moving on to next, but just the Kings' general rankings since this winning streak kind of happened. It goes back to the last 5 games, December 30th. The record lead the NBA in wins, by the way, 5-0. Only team in the NBA that's 5-0 since that date. They are second in scoring, 122.6 points per game. Free throw shooting, believe it or not, even though some misses last night, mostly Keon, I guess, but 85.1%. That's second in the NBA. The net rating 11.1. That's fourth. Steals per game 10.2, fifth. Offensive rating is 117.2. That's 7th. Defensive rating is 106.1. That's 8th. So they're top 10 in offense, top 10 in defense. And I think that their rebounding percentage is also 1 or 2 in that time period. So we're really just seeing them. And again, you have the second or tied for first best rebounder in the NBA in Domantas Sabonis in that time. But you're seeing guys like Devin Carter hit the glass. You're seeing Keegan Murray last night with his career high 9th double-double. The defensive end and the boards are really kind of looking like a priority for this team on the defensive end. And then on the offensive end, 3-point shooting, the volume has increased. Like you mentioned, Brenden, they were over 40% against the Warriors and against, I think,
Memphis.
And then last night started horrible. Like really just, I can't remember what they were in the first half. I think I have it here. I think they were around like 20% in the first half. They finished strong though. They end up around 34, 35%. They're hitting those marks that we've been waiting to see them hit for a very long time. And looking at the first half last night from 3, they go 3 of 16, 18%. Let's look at the second half. Second half, they finish at 47%, 8 of 17 in the second half. So, in-game adjustments, which is something that we've been looking for a lot over the past couple of years. And I think more so that 22-23 season, you're seeing those in-game adjustments take place. We're seeing them again. And that to me is a positive sign no matter who they're playing. And the games will get harder. Boston is always a complete just dumpster fire of a game, especially at the Garden. So we'll see how Brendan's guys do against the Kings on Friday. But encouraging signs, fellas. Encouraging signs. Whether you want to buy in or not, it's up to you, but encouraging.
Yeah, I think that's where, okay, well, I guess a little bit of business that happened today as well. Today was the deadline for guaranteeing or waiving guys that were on non-guaranteed contracts. Technically, those moves take place in a couple days, but today's technically like the functional deadline for that stuff. The Kings had Jay Crowder, Orlando Robinson, and Doug McDermott on non-guaranteed deals or partially guaranteed in all of their cases except Jay Crowder, who joined the team maybe 20 or so games into the season. They end up sticking with Doug McDermott and Jay Crowder and waiving Orlando Robinson. You got Trey Lyles to play that backup center spot a little bit. You got Alex Len. Isaac Jones obviously has emerged a little bit in that role as well. Technically could promote a two-way guy, but I wouldn't expect that to be the route they decide to take here, but opens up a roster spot, also gives them a little bit more than $1 million more wiggle room under that luxury tax line, a line that we know that the ownership of the Sacramento Kings and therefore the front office as well want to stay under. So now they're about 3.2 million under that luxury tax line and 7 million under the first apron. Again, our understanding, at least my understanding, is that they want to stay functioning below that luxury tax line. So any deals that may take place, even if a deal technically could be completed within the parameters of the CBA or just the trade rules in the NBA, the Kings don't want to take back more than 3.2 million in salary and take them over that tax line. And you now have a little bit of another roster spot sitting there if you were to take back 3 players while you sent out 2. So a little bit more flexibility. Any feelings about Orlando not being around? I don't think it makes much of a difference. We already know they needed a backup center. This is a team that their offense kind of goes to crap when Domas goes to the bench.
No, it provides some flexibility. I think they're, like you said, 3.4 million beneath the tax right now, or something. 3.2. So, I mean, you could trade. I mean, the name that we keep hearing is Kevin Huerter's being dangled in trade talk. So he makes around 17 million. You could bring back a $20 million a year player. And we know the Kings have been linked to Cam Johnson. We know the Kings have, previously been linked to Kyle Kuzma. They both make around that amount of money. John Collins makes a little bit more, so they probably have to add other salary than Kevin Huerter. But it just kind of provides them flexibility to find a player that's making 17 to $20 million and not have to really include anything else except for draft capital. Intrigued to see what's next. They have an open roster spot. Keeping Jay and Doug around, I think, were veteran moves, and it does seem like they like to have just kind of like that go-to shooter if things are in a lull. We saw Doug come in even for a minute last night, I believe. Was it last night or maybe the game before? Oh. Just coming in just for a minute, just to kind of see if he can knock down a triple. And
because they couldn't get Miami out of their zone.
No, the 2-3 zone was great, or 3-2 zone. Was it 2-3?
They ended up running both. Yeah, Miami's insane with their zones. They're very unique.
It's Spoelstra, man. But keeping Doug there for that reason, and having Jay really be kind of like, I mean, you see Indiana do it with James Johnson. It's a guy who's been around the league for a decade plus, and that doesn't take anything from anybody. Like a tough kind of enforcer player who you can kind of throw in if need be. I mean, against your Dylan Brooks or Draymond Greens, or just kind of have a guy on the sideline to be able to take players under his wing. But I'm very intrigued to see what they do next and in what direction they go, because it does still seem like a month from now, which I think is less than a month from now, the deadline, February 6th. Like, they got to probably still make an upgrade as well as they've played. Like, I don't think you can get De'Aaron Fox back and have Keegan healthy and Devin Carter and say, okay, this team is fine. They can go compete for top 5, top 6 seed in the West. They're very close. I think they're 3 games back of 5 right now. So hit the ground running, kind of build off what you're creating right now, and emphasize, what you need to. Like, you're seeing Kevin Huerter play right now, essentially probably going to be a backup 3 role once everyone's playing, and we'll see if it's Malik or Keon that go to the bench for De'Aaron on Friday. But it's a very intriguing time for this roster. But I was expecting probably one more of those guys got cut, but I understand why they didn't. And you want NBA ready players on the roster, and I think letting go of one of Doug or Jay, does it make them much worse? Probably not, but it hurts the depth even more, especially at the forward positions too.
Yeah. Orlando Robinson is interesting. I kind of wish we got to see a little bit more of him, just because, he kind of, Frankie, you might know the 4A term, right? I think that's what they call it. I'm curious if that's what he falls into, just because he was so productive in the G League. He's been known to be one of those summer league all-stars who just absolutely dominates. You can understand why. There's not a lot of 7-footers who are, Orlando, even in the brief action we saw him hit some threes. He's not clunky. Neemias Queta kind of walks in and looks like he's still kind of learning how to run a little bit. Like, Orlando Robinson knew how to play in his body, and I think that's pretty rare for those levels, which might have led to his production. But just interesting that we never got to see a good bit of him. It might have been that it's just as simple as, like you guys mentioned earlier, Mike Brown prefers to go with the veteran Alex Len over Orlando Robinson, who might be a little bit more skilled but also might make a little bit more mistakes. So I'm intrigued to see where he goes next. If he stays, maybe, I don't know, Brenden, you probably know about the procedural stuff more than this. Maybe he can stay with Stockton. Again, he's been really, really productive at the G League level. I wonder if someone will give him a chance at an NBA level, because we obviously have seen, as I bring up Neemias Queta, like the Kings let go of a young, raw big man that they probably need, and just kind of let him go thrive somewhere else, where honestly Orlando Robinson signing in Sacramento was viewed across the league as, oh my gosh, like that's a really good young asset that they just acquired that I think a lot of teams are intrigued in. So I think it's weird that we never saw any of him. And then on the Jay and Doug front, I feel like that's, like Frankie said, I think that's just about veterans. Those two guys specifically seem to be taking not just the young guys, I guess specifically the young guys, yes, but really the entire team seems to be really, really close with those two guys specifically. There was that video that the Kings put out in their pregame as everyone's walking in. They say, or I think they were walking out of a practice, and they say like who you text the most, and I think the most common answer was Doug McDermott. And then we've seen Jay Crowder take the rookies under his wing. He takes Isaac Jones to center court to meet the referees. I saw him do the same thing with Devin Carter, brought him along with Isaac Jones the other day to go meet the referees before the game. Small things like that I think really, really matter, and especially I think when you suck, when you're going through a really bad streak, you know who's most likely to let go of the team is the guys that just got there. And I think that those two guys specifically really seem to have stuck through that bad portion of time and stayed very team oriented. And you know, again, in a situation where you could totally understand Doug McDermott and Jay Crowder both being like, I've been around the league. This is crazy. This is not what I signed up for. Both of them kind of sticking through it and really looking like, crazy enough, even though they just got here, two of, I guess you can maybe call them leaders on the team in the most traditional sense. Like, I think you could say that those two guys really do have like a pretty integral part in the actual locker room itself. And I think that it's well needed, but I feel like that's the biggest reason why those two specifically both stay, and maybe why they didn't just choose one of them.
Yeah, two good locker room guys for sure. And they both specialize in opposite ends of the floor. You know, if you need to talk to somebody about offense, go talk to Doug. If somebody needs a defensive boost, you know, that's where Jay introducing guys to refs of Keon, Devin, like different variances between the two of them for sure. I personally don't really care about Orlando, just to be honest. I think that if he was showing it in practice, he would have got out there more. And maybe that's an unfair assumption, but I feel like that's typically how this goes. Not what I've been told, just kind of what I'm assuming there. I think closing comment from myself, and as we can kind of get to that here instead of running for another half hour like we did last episode. I don't know that I feel that much differently about this team. I thought they were already better than the 13 and 18 that they were under Mike Brown. I thought the shooting needed to come back around. They did still need to get healthy, and just some things were not clicking, obviously. The late game execution being a big one. There is a decent amount of luck involved in that. Like Jaime Jaquez missing 2 free throws last night sure did a lot for the Kings, you know? So there are aspects of luck in clutch scenarios, but that's not to take away from, like, they're securing more 50-50 balls. They're not giving up these crazy offensive rebounds, even though there may be 1 or 2 in some of these games in certain instances. By the way, I was laughing to myself a little bit when Kevon Looney came in the game in that Golden State game and instantly got offensive rebounds. I was like, is this triggering for anybody else? Because just right away.
They went to him. They had to go to him too because things were getting so bad. I don't think he was the initial round of rotations. I literally saw it like as like break glass in case of emergency situation. And yeah, he immediately started just kind of bringing back memories of Game 7. So
yeah, Game 7 all over again. But I don't know that I feel that much differently about this team. I think that I'm back to where I was at the beginning of the season, which is progress from when the time when they let Mike Brown go on the 27th, which how far removed from that are we at this point? We are
10,
like a week and a half.
11 days, yeah.
Which is wild. Feels like longer. But 18 and 19, you are one game. The Kings are one game out of the 8th seed and only 3.5 games out of the 4th seed. even. Like they're
Crazy.
right there within striking distance. This Western Conference is crowded as heck. The Phoenix Suns are also in a nosedive for what it's worth. They're now 12th below the Kings at 16 and 18. They're 3 and 7 in their last 10. And I think it's even worse if you go further back than that. You saw the Warriors do a totally drastic swap in their record. We've seen Milwaukee have a drastically different first and second half of the year. Like there's still a lot of basketball to be played. And I think that we can see things turn around very quickly for a lot of these teams. And you're seeing that happen right now for the Kings, but a move still needs to be made. I think if this team is going to propel itself to getting out of the first round, or, where I feel comfortable, where that's just not like a pie in the sky best case scenario. Cause I think that this team somehow could, if they were a 6 seed and then playing the 3 seed, but I guess even the 2 seed in the Western Conference isn't going to be the most intimidating this year. But if you get matched up against OKC, you're in a really tough spot. I don't see how they really get out of that round. But anybody else, like, sure, they have a puncher's chance. But I think to give yourself more than that, this team still needs to make some sort of move to get more wing forward depth behind Keegan Murray. And so, kind of saying I don't feel that much differently about this team, even though it's progress to have recovered from a low point where I was questioning if my initial expectations were too high in the first place.
Yeah, I think we've always, not always, but long been looking at that kind of like expected win-loss record for their season. I think they were like, they've been above 500 for the most part. Even when things got really bad, their expected win-loss record on basketball reference has been above it. And even right now, their expected win-loss record is 21 and 16. That'd be 10th in the NBA out of 30 teams. So, a couple of bad breaks. I mean, I'm looking at that past couple of games, a couple weeks here. The 1-point loss to Denver in a game that really could have gone either way was a backbreaker. And then the straw that broke the camel's back was the Pistons game, which eventually cost Mike Brown his job. So a couple of games here or there, the Kings are at 500 or a little better, and they have too much talent to be as bad as they were. And, maybe they weren't pressing the right buttons. Maybe it was Mike. Maybe it was a little deeper than we thought as far as the players and how they're responding to the locker room and just kind of the rotations and whatnot. And the right buttons are being pressed right now. And also the players that were underperforming are now performing at the level that they should. Even players like DeRozan, who were not, playing well down the final stretch last night, outscores the Heat in double overtime. That's the kind of players that they have on the roster and the kind of late game execution that they have. And the late game execution, for the record, has been pretty good for the most part during this winning streak, which is huge to me, in my opinion, especially looking at those Denver and Pistons games, how it was a total mishandling of those games. They've been taking care of business the last couple of games, obviously. So do I feel like they're solved and they're going to be in the playoffs and they're right back where we thought they were going to be in October? I think that they're close. I feel like I do feel good about them as long as they stay healthy. I mean, you're going to get Fox back probably this weekend. I mean, they have to have practice this week to get a kind of a full idea of how he's doing, but it seems like they were kind of holding him out because they had a longer break and he should be a player for them either in Boston or Chicago. So how does Fox play, when he returns? What does the rotation look like? Does Keon start? Does Malik go back to a 6-man role now that Keon's been kind of just a menace in the starting lineup? I mean, I don't really know how that goes. It seems like Malik wanted to start, but we'll see what the conversation is like between him and Doug. It will be different between him and Mike. I don't know. Keegan is showing life, which is huge. He hasn't really shown any life outside of the defensive end for the entirety of the year until the last couple of games, knocking down threes and continuing to play a good brand of defense. So, and then Domantas Sabonis, who deserves, I think, a little hat tip. Triple-double last night, shooting 44% from 3, I think. He's already passed up his total from last year and made threes over 35 games, I think he's played in so far. So that's crazy. Maybe he'll take more threes going forward. But like you said, Brenden, still feels like a move is like kind of waiting in the wings. And maybe it's a forward, maybe it's a backup big, maybe it's both. But they are super thin at the backup forward spot behind Keegan. And obviously now they have 2 centers in the roster. They have Domas and Alex Len, and maybe Isaac Jones can play a little bit here or there, but he's on a 2-way. So do you convert that to a full spot, or do you use the game limit? I don't know. Trey play small ball 5, sure, but I feel like you need one more big on the roster to really kind of survive down the stretch. But ultimately, winning games solves everything, and a 5-game winning streak on the heels of a 6-game losing streak is probably the best. It's literally the best kind of plan you can draw up after something like that.
Triple double for the bonus.
Triple double. Yes, sir. That's exactly what it was. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add. You guys kind of laid it all out. I mean, I definitely agree with you guys both that a trade still needs to be made, and I think it's really funny that, you know, we definitely could have called it, but a 5-game win streak and just quiet, totally quiet on that front. It's not as if that the team doesn't need to make a trade any less than they needed to 2 weeks ago. They still need to, and the fact that they haven't, I still think every day that goes by is just absolutely insane to me. It doesn't matter that they win. It's just crazy to me that nothing has been done. I understand it buys them some time, but if they, like Frankie said, if they think Devin Carter and De'Aaron Fox coming back healthy and Keegan Murray, I guess you can throw into that as well, coming back healthy is going to be what ultimately changes the season around, I just don't think that's good enough to be where they ultimately want to be. If they want to maybe make the play-in and then who knows what happens, at best lose in the first round to a 1 or 2 seed, like that's kind of where they're trending right now, and that's not, I think, where any of us even had our expectations before the season. I think, like Brenden said, if you want to really reach the second round, or hey, maybe we can be a team that turns this around completely and does make a Western Conference Finals run, you have to make a move, and some could say that's already too far gone with the hole that you've dug yourself. But if you realistically want to put yourself in a situation to be taken seriously at that level again, I just think you ultimately have to make a move. So I love the fight they showed in the game yesterday. That to me really did highlight more so what it looks like when teams do give up, because if that's just what it's supposed to look like, I mean, it really did feel like the effort that was given yesterday, truly, they just continued to play every possession like the score was 0-0. That was really cool to see. You know, again, it's a cliche to say play like it's 0-0 or, you know, just never give up, play until the final whistle and whatever the score is. Yesterday, especially more so, you know, the last 10 minutes when they're down 17 or whatever it was with 10 minutes to go, they never put their head down. They never threw up desperation and then, you know, got it within 12. And then you saw an uptick in effort. They just continued to play possession by possession. And isn't that ironic that that's all Mike Brown was asking for all those times ago? So, that feels like a good place to end it.
Yeah, definitely agreed. I think we're going to find out a lot about this team over this road trip. You got Boston, Chicago, Milwaukee, and then they come back and have a tough matchup that's slipping my mind as well. I thought that it was an annual.
Houston.
I think you're right. In my mind, it was an annual butt kicking. Every time they went to Boston, they lost by 1 point last year. Actually,
yeah.
Don't do that. That's not what happened. The Kings were down 20 in the fourth quarter.
Is that
Boston
what happened?
pulled their starters, and then the Kings made a stupid run, and then they actually should have won that game. If you remember,
cute.
I think Colby Jones had the tip, and then Keegan could have had a tip.
You wrote that game. You know what happened.
I did. I did forget about that, but you're right. Boston scored 17 points in the fourth quarter of this game. Sacramento had 15 points in the first quarter.
Don't act like you know what happened.
I forgot. That was the Colby Jones tip-in game. 1 point loss.
Crazy.
Year before, 104-122. Year before that, 128-75 in Boston. This is the Tyrese Halliburton one.
That's where he said. What did Tyrese say after that game?
How far back do we have to go? That he wasn't going to let the culture of the Sacramento Kings or the losing. Yeah, not culture.
Define his career. Or something.
I won't. I refused. I refuse to be a part of the losing culture or something like
We're
that.
We're going to turn this around and I'm going to be here for it. And then he was
technically he technically did turn it around.
He did.
Sure.
He brought to Sacramento.
They did win in Boston in 2020-21, 107-96 in this game. Let's see.
What month was that?
Fans in attendance for that one?
March. Boston also had 15 points in the fourth quarter of this
game.
March
of 2021.
There had been no fans there.
What date? What date?
March 19th.
I'm pretty sure that's after. Ooh, no. That must have been right before.
There had to have been no fans there.
Kemba Walker, Marcus Smart, Jalen
I
Brown.
can't
Jason
imagine
Tatum,
that they would
Jalen
play that quick because I think everything blew up March 2021. I don't think they would have played. They would have gotten everything.
I'm watching it,
I mean, yeah.
but after that's over, I'm going to see if there's fans in the stands for this game. I don't think there are.
But that's the last win. It's been a second. Solid Buddy Hield game, Fox game. Rashawn Holmes, 25 in this game. Throwback
Guys,
to what we were talking about, Rashawn Holmes and Robert Williams.
There are like 40 people at this game. Like 40. Like, I don't know if I can rewind that and share my screen. I don't know if I can. I think I have to like allow my computer permission, but I'll
not
try.
like a COVID no fans game.
I'm trying to pause at the beginning. Let me see if I can share my screen. I don't know if I
It was
allowed.
that Pelicans game.
How do you share a screen on this thing?
Present at the
That's
bottom.
right.
There.
Okay, let's see if I can do it.
Anybody on the audio side, check out the YouTube. Always the pod on YouTube as well.
Can you see this?
We can. Nobody
Look at
in the
this.
stands.
There's
Okay.
nobody here. There's
So this is
nobody at
fresh
this
dope.
game.
Or those are like workers. So that's not even like when they had cutouts.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Who cooked
What
in this game
is
though?
this?
I'm not sure who cooked in this game, but this is this is
Rashawn Holmes did, and De'Aaron did. Buddy was all right. But we'll see. Boston did. People are saying, "Oh, Boston or something." It was OKC. It was OKC. They lost to. So we'll see what ends up happening. It'd be a great win for Sacramento for sure. Milwaukee's a tough opponent as well. Chicago's actually not doing horrible right now. I think Levine's rolling a little bit, getting Lonzo back. What'd you find there, Chris?
Nothing. It was just the year. This is the year that they returned from the COVID, from the bubble season.
Gotcha.
the audience had to, or the attendance had to have been probably like 113 or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the last game they won. And I guess there's a reason why we don't remember it, because that time was a fog for everybody. So
Absolutely.
who won the championship that year? 21? Was that the Bucks?
I think
Milwaukee?
That's the Bucks,
Yeah. Milwaukee Phoenix, the Giannis block.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we will see if the Kings can keep up their positive momentum. 5-game win streak, 5-1 under interim head coach Doug Christie. We're going to keep covering it here. Obviously, Return of the Roar podcast, all audio platforms for podcast on the YouTube side as well. Like I just kind of mentioned there, like subscriptions, rating, reviews, all that stuff is always appreciated. Definitely be sure to also check out any sort of written work we got going on, Sactownsports.com. Sactown Sports on all of our social pages as well to stay up to date with everything. And of course, radio shows 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday, Sactown Sports 1140. So appreciate everybody for listening to this episode of the Return of the Roar podcast. You'll hear from myself, Chris, and maybe Frankie. We'll see in the next week or so here. Thanks, guys.